The North and South were regions with different cultures, attitudes, and histories. The South developed a plantation aristocracy that became rich on the backs of slaves growing cotton. The North had a complex economic structure that included a large manufacturing base, agriculture from the East Coast to the Great Plains, and considerable multinational trade. Customs duties were the major source of federal government revenue, advantageous to the industrial North, but not the South. The two regions sought political power mainly by how many free or slave states existed. More states meant more power in the Senate, with the North having a larger population, only three-fifths of slaves were counted, meaning more power in the House of Representatives. The South wanted slave owning or at least slave friendly presidents. The 1860 election was contentious, and Northerner Abraham Lincoln won largely because of Southern political divisions. Southern states started seceding prior to Lincoln's inauguration, claiming to be the injured party. The South became the Confederacy with a separate government and a successful military commander, Robert E. Lee. Their one important mission was not to be defeated, so they started what became the Civil War. Granted, they were militaristic, but this was the last thing they should have done. Lack of food, with related starvation and disease, poor infrastructure and logistics were major causes of their ultimate defeat. The Confederacy was cocky at the start, claiming great resources and military excellence for a quick victory. The logistics plan was to supply adequate rations for the troops. The standard was a pound of meat, especially salted pork, a pound of bread, dried vegetables or beans, coffee, sugar, salt, pepper, and spices, plus cornmeal, apples, and sweet potatoes. The North would add rye bread, canned food, and potatoes. During the war, troops and goods could move by train in most of the North and to a limited extent in the Confederacy. However, considerable efforts were needed by wagons to move troops and goods, especially as the war moved south. Plus, the cavalry was a major component of the fighting forces. Horses and mules were rationed 14 pounds of hay a day, 12 pounds of grains, and 10 pounds of water. The Army of the Potomac had 780,000 horses. They died by the thousands from war wounds, starvation, and exhaustion. Especially toward the end in the South, they were killed for food. The key food issues were needed production, food preservation, and efficient delivery. Food remained adequate most of the time for the North, with certain innovations important. At the top of the list might be Borden's condensed milk, providing a valuable drink with nutrition that did not spoil. Canning was improved and can openers developed. Compact field rations were developed for troops both in garrison and on the move. Many of the fresh foods like potatoes, beans, peas, and rice were desiccated, which had the moisture removed. These became less cumbersome to ship and remained edible. Soldiers on the move could be issued several days of adequate food to put in their haversacks. Arguably, adequate food was a necessary condition to victory. Union troops had advantages. There was plenty of food coming from multiple sources from the East Coast to the Great Plains. Camp cooks prepared coffee served with sugar, meat by the slice, bread, potatoes served in the soldiers' mess kits. The major food problems were logistics, poor transportation infrastructure, particularly in the South, corrupt provisioners, and Confederate raiders of commissary wagons. Confederate soldiers expected a pint of cornmeal and a quarter-pound of bacon. Corn, peanuts, and jerky were considered on the march foods. Available foods might be cornbread, hardtack, peas, and sorghum. Soups and stews were made of beans, black-eyed peas, and cornbread. Rations got worse over time, with the South having trouble growing food and transportation infrastructure went from bad to worse. Overseas food had to come from blockade runners. Logistics in general and food in particular dropped the longer the war lasted. By the time Lee's troops were trapped at Appomattox, they were hungry, and Lee had to ask Grant for food to feed his troops. The 20th century should have been a century of peace. Instead, the first half was dominated by two world wars. The first one was the most ridiculous. Next time on Food, History, and Mystery.